Okay, and good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to welcome over 200 people to this morning's webinar, which is great. We would otherwise be attending the London Christmas Party Show at this point, were it not for the current situation, but I'm very grateful to Story for having set this up instead. The session will hopefully be videoed and available for sharing with you in the next 24 hours or so, and the link will be emailed later today, so please feel free as we go along to ask questions using the Q&A button or the chat box at the bottom. So firstly, some intros. I'm Mike Kershaw. I'm founder of the advisory firm Kershaw Partners, but I was chairman of Concerto Group for many years, which I helped to create with Sam over 20 years ago. I've had 35 years in this industry and am now a non-exec director, advisor, mentor, and investor in a number of events and event-related businesses. So, firstly, just want to apologise for the photograph, which was put up by Sam of me taken when I was about 14. I've had a lot of comments about that, so thank you very much, Sam. I'm joined by Richard Wellington. Lovely to see him. Richard is the chair of EMA, the Event Marketing Association, the UK Industry Association for in-house event professionals. He was formerly the founder and CEO of First Protocol, which is now First, and Rich has been involved in the events and hospitality industry all his life. So having exited First at the end of 2012 through an MBO, he has stayed extremely active in the industry, investing in numerous startups, advisory positions as a non-exec and so on. In 2013, he founded the EMA with a number of senior corporate contacts, and to kind of create a place for them. I mean, no doubt he'll talk about it a bit later on, but he has over 1,000 members in that, all from the corporate world. He also sits on the board of both the BVEP and the industry charity Meeting Needs. And finally, we have, of course, Sam Gill, the founder of Story Events, which includes Venue Search London, the summer party show, and of course the show that we would have been at today, the London Christmas Party Show. Sam was one of the co-founders and formerly CEO of Concerto Group, where I had the privilege of working with him for much of the last 20 years. Sam is a passionate supporter of the event industry, and I would always say a master of the event spreadsheet. Now, we all know this is an extraordinary time for our industry. So in the next 30, 40 minutes or so, we're going to be discussing some of the short and medium-term implications for us all of what is actually going on, and how we are interpreting what is happening and what we believe is likely to happen in the industry, and particularly what companies, agencies, venues, and suppliers need to be doing to come out of this stronger. So firstly, I guess, good news overnight, good news on the furlough extension. Sam, what are your thoughts on that?
Thanks, Mike, for the introduction. I think it's very welcome, obviously, to have the guaranteed additional month extension and then the longer extension maybe to October. And it will really help with the survival of many agencies, venues and suppliers of all sizes, I would say, because the smaller ones can be fleeted, but the larger ones could be more robust, but it's hard to tell. But I think that the important thing to note is that this may, the Chancellor has extended the lengths of the bridge, but the chasm actually may be getting a bit longer as well, because this may actually delay the return of some of our client staff to work and to be able to attend events as well. So it's a slight double-edged sword there. I think the other point I want to make, it's really important that we keep our extended furloughed workers engaged as we legally can. I would urge people to consider training, as we are at the moment, the ability to rotate furloughed staff, which I think is another thing that maybe people aren't thinking about enough, to keep that level of engagement as people now look to another, 12, 13 weeks of furloughing or likely furloughing, unless the business need is there. And I think this part-time returns thing, which they're mooting and haven't put any flesh on the bones yet, is also going to be highly valuable for us as we try and work our way back viably into some kind of normal operation.
And we think that's going to be allowing people on furlough to do a certain amount of part-time work. Is that what we think that's
As I understand it? Please use the comment or chat box on Q&A if you think any different. Yes, but I think he'll only put the detail on it when he assesses how the whole country is being weaned off it and the cost to the country. Obviously, the hidden cost of extended furlough is reduced, reduced tax take and lots of other bits and pieces that will come at us down the line. But that seems to pale into an insignificance in relation to the short-term handouts that he's giving to keep many industries going. But we hope that a lot of people who can get back to work either from home or anywhere else begin to do so, because I think that will begin to get people to begin to think about working events. Obviously, we'll talk about that a bit later.
Yeah. Good. Now, I understand that you've just undertaken a short corporate buyers survey, Sam. So it would be quite a nice idea to start by having a quick look at what that was. How many buyers did we have?
We had 136. I'll just, shall I just introduce this? Hopefully everyone at home can see the slides, or maybe at work. So we always do a survey this time of year, but I did a very quick one very recently. So it's a real temperature check, if you'll forgive the sort of testing pun there, of how people felt about the events industry, corporate buyers only, not agencies, in a sort of 27-hour period from 9 a.m. on Monday to noon on Tuesday, which is yesterday. And we had 134 corporate buyers in the results pool. So it's kind of a reasonable sample size, but obviously, obviously normally we have many more than that on the sample. So we need to treat these charts these two charts with a grain of caution, let's say. This slide here shows what was a question about whether people have contracted events in any of the following months. So these are people who've currently got contracted events, and we only asked about those 4 months, so we didn't ask about any others. And I think interestingly, there are still people who are holding on to events in September and October and November, and obviously a much larger number later in the year. And these are events that aren't postponed or cancelled as yet. And then I'll just nip on to the next one, and then maybe, Mike, we can have a broader discussion about it. So this is in which month do you expect London corporate events to restart? A slightly different question. These are people, when people think that's the case. A little bit in July and August. I wouldn't put myself there. I put myself firmly in September before you ask me. But it's interesting that actually half the people think that the events are going to restart before the end of October, give or take, and half afterwards. And a significant 28% don't think they're going to start till 2021. And bear in mind, this is live events, and this is for the questions were around internal events, not client entertainment or anything else. This is internal conferences, parties, celebrations, whatever that may be. So that's the results as indicated, and I thank those for partaking.
And the respondents, just so I'm clear, the respondents who took part in the survey were mainly corporate event buyers or agencies as well?
All corporate buyers, and Richard came in with a point which last night when we had a quick pre-chat, which I think he'll bring up again. And Richard, the average event size is 118 in this survey. So you may say it's slightly on the smaller side of events. Yeah. And there are only 20% of respondents who operate events averaging over 200. So one might say it's not indicative of maybe the larger corporate trends, but I know Richard's got a point.
Yeah. How does this fit in with the feedback that you've been getting from your members?
Yeah, generally, I mean, I would say that we've done a similar sort of survey with our members twice now, and there's a much bigger shift to next year. There will be a desire to do things earlier. Yes, people are still holding on to bookings that were postponed from the last few months, which basically got moved into the final quarter of this year. So they're still sort of sitting there, and people are saying, okay, we're still looking at doing some things, but they're kind of now driving those more digitally, and will introduce live into those if and when they can. There are a couple of people who are physically planning events in the final quarter of this year. One of our senior members yesterday spoke about moving a conference that she was hosting in Prague, which is a global CEO conference, and moving it to London for October, because these people do want to meet. However, she will still be under government and also corporate travel policy to whether that event can eventually go ahead, but they are planning that event now. So there's still a lot of influence or direction required from governments to what we can do and when we can do it, but predominantly big move to next year, Q1, Q2.
Sam, did you get any sense of obviously you have the numbers of people in those events, the type of events that they're talking about? I mean, will it be mainly conferences and comms events, or
these are all
social events that I know lots and lots of people in the sort of special event industry are particularly kind of sensitive to and concerned about what we might call, sort of employee engagement events rather than client or conferences.
These are all internal events, so events for people within their employee profile, and so I didn't specify, although I do come back to a Christmas party chart, as you know, at the end of this session, if time allows, which is a more specific question about Christmas party buying intentions, which we'll park till the end if we may.
Right, okay.
Mike, can I jump in there and ask people to make comment in the chat box on what they're currently doing, where they're currently thinking about, where they're postponing or cancelling, or if they're actively looking at doing events, put their comments in there. They can do it anonymously. Just helps gather intel and share intel across the group. And you've got 180 odd people on the call, so it's good to hear, good to see.
Yeah, for some reason I can't seem to see the chat box on my screen right now, but if either of you two guys can, then please dip in with any questions that you're seeing. Let's just quickly talk about the phased process that's been brought in about the likely lifting of restrictions and how that might be affecting events over the course of the coming months. It feels like there's a starting to open up the economy a bit, but it very much feels that is not going to be happening until a bit later on in the summer. What's your view, Richard, on sort of in terms of the timing of lifting of restrictions and to allow events to actually start taking place?
Well, predominantly, it's extremely challenging. Events take months to plan. We've got to look at the content, the speakers, the attendee, the venue, the production, etc., etc. And we have to wait for government guidance on what we can do and can't do and when that has happened, and it could still be affected by changes in the process. If we move from a stage, we're currently stage 4, if we can get down to stage 3, I think they talk about stage 2, we can start doing events. However, if we slip back to stage 3, do they put a block straight away on those? We don't know, so we're constantly watching that. So I think the biggest position on that is there is very much a flip taking place within corporate communications, and we're now seeing, whilst previously the events were the driver for engagement, customer engagement, employee engagement, and technology was added, or digital stuff was added to that, like streaming, casting, podcasts, etc. That is now flipped, and communication event strategy is now being led by digital, because they know they can deliver a digital platform, and the view is that we will then add live to the digital when and where we can in a smaller way. And so when people are ready to come back, so that and again, there we have then, when that starts to happen, the real hybrid, the birth of the hybrid.
Yeah. Sam, what's your view on the sort of current phasing then, just before we come back to do a bit more of this about types of events?
I'm really positive, actually. I'm slightly more positive than Richard, but obviously the clients are leading this, not us agencies. I think obviously July and August are pretty much a write-off for events. They generally are anyway. I think September is the big focus. And obviously Richard's right in saying that will people book events into September? Possibly not. But as we've seen from the survey, there are a few people who have events booked in September already, presumably the majority of those before we knew better. And I think there are some encouraging signs. We are slightly being led by Germany in Europe here. And I think that, they've indicated that they're happy to allow trade fairs. They're not viewed as mass events. They're allowing trade fairs to commence in June, as in 3 weeks' time. Obviously, that will be subject to lots of other restrictions and social distancing rules. But I take encouragement for that. I think the big question is attendee confidence. And I know Richard and I have talked about this quite a lot. And I think that when people start going back to their offices and start using public transport, for those that, like me, would be exhausted by a 60-mile cycle ride to the office, I think that we don't know yet, but I sense that, and I hope I'm right, that people, as they begin to return after this long period of isolation, and it will be a gradual return, that they'll actually begin to feel comfortable if they're on a tube or on a bus and going to the office, sitting 2 meters away from people. I sense that the difference between that and going off site for an event with the appropriate measures in place at the venue, and more of that no doubt later, I think people will. So I think we're a bit early to judge, but I sense we're judging it from the wrong position at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing I'd really like to add here is I was looking at the CIPD, which is a website this morning, and the government is not stopping people meeting people from other offices, other companies in other offices. And I interpret that, and please don't rush out and do this and sue me later, but I interpret this as an ability for us now to actually start doing show rounds. And I think obviously show rounds are a vital part of the process. Virtual show rounds are great, but actually I think we are now allowed to, and we need to check this, actually allow people to go with suitable social distancing to look at venues. And I think that'll be a vital step in the return of events, and psychologically and obviously commercially. Yeah,
I agree. So when we think events will return, and look, let's face it, events will come back at some point. It's just a bit of a matter of when. But when they do, how do we think they're going to have changed? How do you see clients and venues and so on having to create, do you see them having to create new and different and much more safe environments for events?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's, corporates will be putting out, and I know this because we're working as a collaborative approach to putting out some requirements to the supply chain to say this is what we need. Now that will be driven by government direction on what should be how we should be managing it, but then there's an interpretation of that. But around distancing, numbers per room, food service, certainly immediately people say no buffets, because again you're just sort of touching that, whether it's plate service, box service, that sort of stuff. Maybe we see the end of the cocktail party with trays of canopies for the foreseeable future. So lots of changes will need to take place. Venues will need to have the level of technology that they can support live streaming. If you don't have the bandwidth of as they call the pipe into your venue, then people aren't going to hold a conference there because they're going to need the technology, digital integration there. But also, I think let's take a quick step back, because one of the things that got raised yesterday at one of our meetings, which I have put a question in via the BVEP to the DCMS, the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, who as events we sit under, around what can we ask guests or attendees in the registration process. So this is all comes part to this sociological point of view of when are people going to be ready to return to events? Because, you know, we will need them to perhaps be self-declaring. You know, either they've had it or they've had tests that they haven't got it. We will need to know people's health situations, or we say to people, if you are of this type, you shouldn't attend. Now, those sort of things, asking for some of those questions, break the GDPR rules. So we're asking the DCMS for some guidance on that, of what can, or whether there be some relaxation on the information we can ask attendees and hold on to.
I mean, there's clearly a lot of detail that needs to be filled in, but for the moment, it feels to me, we were talking about venues. Venues have to be prepared for a whole new way of doing events now. You know, they've got to have improved connectivity because there's likely to be more of these sort of hybrid types of events. They've got to have conceivably things like thermal imaging to ensure guests who are arriving at the event, you can identify them as potentially at risk, and so on. So I think certainly, I felt that this morning, actually, funny enough, I got the note from my golf club, which is opening up this week, and you wouldn't believe how prescriptive they're being about everybody, exactly where you can go and what route you have to take and where you have to wash your hands and all the rest of it. And I suspect that venues will be needing to be very prescriptive, certainly in the early stages as they start to welcome guests back. But certainly the sports clubs and the golf clubs that I've seen, it's phenomenal what level of detail they're going into.
Yeah, and
they've got to be prepared, haven't they? It's not going to be just people wandering in willy-nilly as it has been before. And
there's some good learning already now coming out of China, who have started to do live events. They had the Shanghai Car Show 2 weeks ago. But again, people turning up, being tested. Now, again, China's under a different thing because it's a dictatorship. So they can make you say, you have to do this, you have to do that. But you had to get a barcode, you have to be tested before you left your place of residence. And then you were tested again when you arrived, and you were given like a green card, a code to say that you had been tested. And again, you know, are we going to be acceptable to those levels of restriction and governance?
It's going to make us think twice before actually doing an event if it becomes even more challenging. But from the industry point of view, we've got to try and make this as easy as possible for clients and for venues to be able to facilitate events and host events wherever.
Yeah. So and working together,
doing that, and the production companies doing that, and everyone trying to work together on what is the best and safest way of actually operating a venue and operating an event.
Yeah, and I think the stuff that government will put out will be very ambiguous and quite restrictive, because of course that will be at the highest level. There is then common sense and collaborating and working together on what is the process, what do we want, what do we need, and where do we need to be flexible. Yeah.
So let's just quickly come on to the question about sort of these new events. Lots of work, people are talking about hybrid events at the moment, or virtual events. Sam, what do you feel about this whole area? Can they ever be as effective as live environments?
No, they can't. In a simple, but I will extend that answer. I think hybrid events aren't as good as live events, simply because the networking, the idea sharing, the morale. You know, we're social animals, and there is a lack of collective intelligence that is in the virtual world, as I think everyone will experience, and you may well view today's session as a fine example of that. But obviously they can work for both internal and external conferencing. We've seen virtual conferences on BBC Question Time with Fiona, sitting on a stage without an audience. We've seen, hybrid has existed for years. TED Talks have been operating in a hybrid format. So they will work. But I think the key is to make sure that your production values are high on those things, much higher than we're presenting today, for reasons I hopefully you will excuse. But, having a decent stage set, good production, obviously is key. And it may be that, you know, with conferences, you still need a venue of the same size because you're seating people separately in a virtual, in a hybrid solution. So if you had a conference for 200 people last year and you want to do it as sort of 50-50 hybrid, which I hope that we work towards, you'll still need a conference venue of the same size, but obviously you'll be saving some money in some areas. But if anyone thinks that any internal or external conference is going to happen without live streaming, quality live streaming, then they're kidding themselves, because this is the new world. And the percentage of live versus hybrid, I think it's always great to have a live audience. It's great for the speakers, and it's also great for as we know from Question Time, it's slightly more, it's not as effective, I think, as a communication medium without that.
Yeah.
I think just to finish off on that, I think production values need to be good. There are obviously several things like polling, Q&A, coffee break quizzes, sending remote delegates, effectively luncheon vouchers or deliveries. So there are various thoughts to help with the remote engagement that I think will add value, but they're not as good. Trade shows we've talked about recently. I think obviously hybrid platforms for trade shows will be essential, because some people want to attend and not be able to attend, you know, at 2 days' notice because of various illnesses, possibly including COVID. We'll need wider aisles, we'll need safer contact sharing. So, you know, how you share details at a trade show or a conference needs consideration, but obviously Bluetooth is not only great for our testing program, but it's also our track and trace program, but it's also very valuable for distant detail sharing.
But I don't think everyone should assume that it's all going to come easy putting all these things together. Lots and lots of different platforms. And I think certainly we've been talking at NOBA, the event Wi-Fi recently, about this very subject, that actually you want to use lots of different platforms, and it's very, very important that all the connectivity and the Wi-Fi, even at the sort of the speakers' homes and all the rest of it, are checked and you know, will work in the overall environment. So there's a lot of stuff that is needed in a sort of technical sense to make these things work, and that's not to be underestimated.
Yeah, I just want to finish, Mike, with the last point about staff parties. There are a lot of people on here who are deep into summer Christmas parties. Well, summer last year maybe. Yeah. And I think that the big issue is for a social event like a Christmas party or a staff party, that's the big issue, because you don't need to live stream anything. But what you do need to do is to make those events work. And I was giving some thought to an analogy, and I think it's, you know, running a staff party with social distancing is a bit like a silent disco. Not that I've participated too often, but it's kind of okay, but not really the same, if you know what I mean. So you can imagine a socially distant staff party is going to have the same issues as they're going to have in primary schools. Yeah. But the key is people psychologically.
Patrick Donovan at Tobacco Dot posted something on LinkedIn the other day. I just thought there's no such thing as a virtual event. But what he was saying is we need to use this new kind of technology to still create theatre. And I know Adam Sturberg Clark was saying a similar thing. We need to think and be creative about how we can still develop genuinely kind of interactive experiences for people in a virtual world that is still fun and enjoyable, and we can do food deliveries, we can try and bring audiences together as best we can. And I think that's where some creativity's really got to be sort of brought to the fore at this point. That, you know, otherwise, you know, there's going to be huge challenges in actually getting people together and for it to work as an event, and that's going to be you know, something we'll all be focusing on in the future, no doubt.
Yeah, I think Mike, just one small point, this social distancing thing, you know, it's a matter of timing as to when it goes away, because obviously the really good news for the average event audience is that they're generally, not exclusively, not in a high risk category. So that the government policy on social distancing will adjust. Whether it adjusts in time for this Christmas or next summer is a hard ask, but they will adjust it. You know, it's a slightly controversial comment maybe, but you know, like the schools, you know, it's really important that we're aware. Obviously, we need to shelter, and all companies have a responsibility to shelter they're more at-risk people, either at home or away from event environments. But it may be that the social distancing rules are adapted. You know, they're a meter in some places, 6 foot in America, being non-metric, and 1.5 meters in Germany. So there may be some adjustment. And obviously the ability to meet, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that outdoor events, so venues with large outdoor areas, maybe they stick a marquee or a pavilion top, as they do at the brewery and other places, to create an outside area where the viral spread is well reputed not to be as bad.
Okay, let's come on to, are we, if events start to come back as we are, how can clients book events with greater confidence with venues and or agencies, given the understandable economic strain that some of the people have in the supply chain? Do you think that's going to become more important, Sam?
Yeah, I'll be brief because I've talked a lot, but I think the most important thing to do is obviously any supplier that you're using. So if you're a client listening in, you're talking about agencies and suppliers. If you're an agency, you're talking about venues and suppliers. You obviously need to check their financial viability so that any deposits you pay are reasonably well secured. Companies House is no good for that really, and Dun & Bradstreet don't have any better information generally. Maybe clients should consider booking venues more directly, and maybe some larger suppliers. Travel, obviously clients continue to book travel as and when allowed. And I think also use established venues, consider the viability of the venues. Obviously the furlough extension will help, but there are lots of ways that you can ameliorate some of the risk in terms of booking. There are certain venue groups. I mean, government, Natural History Museum is a fairly secure place to book a venue because they're owned by HM government, and if they go down, then we're all in some trouble. But I think carefully research, check your contracts, and I think the other really important thing that venues and suppliers can do is actually allow people COVID postponement clauses. If you want to get some bookings in at all, then flexibility, because having something in the diary for a couple of months and getting a deposit in is better than nothing. So I urge venues and suppliers to be flexible. We've had mixed experiences with that, but I think it's really important that they are. Yeah. But Richard will have a better view from the client side, no doubt.
Yeah, well, no, I generally agree with all of what you said there. Is, clients are going to be looking for, and again, this has been discussed at length, because there are people who've got, who've paid deposits, who've cancelled events, struggling to get those deposits back and being asked to leave the money with the supply chain to help fund that supply chain. But of course, there are questions about, are my suppliers going to be there when we do come back? Yeah. What's going to be there and what's not going to be there? Are they going to be as financially stable as they were before? All these sort of questions. So there's going to be a whole process of reviewing contracts and agreements going forward. I would be saying they'll be looking for guarantees over the funds, possibly. So, an escrow account and stuff like that. So even if we're putting funds to an agency, they'll only be released to the supply chain through a dual signature. Agree to, like free venue finding service and research. So, at the moment, venue finders do it for free. And of course, now they've got this massive headache. They've done all these cancellations and stuff for free, and they've got nothing. So I would suggest to those people, put a clause in your contract that if this happens, then your client will agree to pay you 2 days work at £500 a day or £350 a day. And I don't think corporates would be against that, certainly in these early stages. So, think about different ways of changing it. And like you say, Sam, with the contracts going forward, it's not just COVID-19, it's potential future mutations of COVID-19. Insurances are trying to wiggle out, saying, "Oh, well, it's not in your clause," which is ridiculous, because we didn't know about it as a disease before it happened. So, those things will be being absolutely diligently checked and cross-checked by at the end of the day, the end buyer.
Absolutely. Guys, did we have any questions come up on the chat box? I've not been able to see.
You've got there's some questions in the Q&A, and you've got quite a lot of chat going on.
Anything worth sharing?
It's difficult to do both here.
Mike,
okay.
come back to me.
We'll come on to the questions then. Maybe you can just if you can just identify the ones that might be interesting. We've got about 5 to 10 minutes left. The big question then, I suppose, which people will be wanting to hear is the sorts of views on how we see demand and volumes in 2020 or 2021 compared to 2019, and what the drop is really likely to be. And then I guess how long you think it's going to be until the industry starts to recover to anything like the 2019 level, and that's in the overall kind of events world. And I don't know what the BBEP view is on that, Richard.
Well,
how long is it going to take for us?
I think there's a much bigger picture here at play as well. Is that what the government have done and everything else was about, saving lives and not overwhelming the NHS. But of course, suppressing the peak. But in reality, the flip side of that is the impact it's had on the workforce across the UK and globally, and also the economy. There's no question we are in a recession. Even though it's come out today, but that's March figures and behind. We're potentially going to be going into a depression. So economically, companies are going to be strapped. There's going to be a lot of next 18 months of getting back up and recovering. But again, we need that sort of vaccine for that. So one of the things I've been recommending to people is when they look at these things, when they start to think about what they're doing and how they're affecting, there's a pest analysis approach. So look at the politics, look at the economics, look at the sociological impacts of what you're looking to do, and look at technology, and then try and work out your solutions and your approach. Because all these things have to interact with one another to help you get a roadmap for the future. There's absolutely a passion for live, and there's a big, live really is a big motivator for people, or great platform for communicating. But I see my prediction for the next sort of 18 months is, we will be in a recession for a couple of years. The events live will return slowly, and they'll start locally, and grow from there through things like hub and spoke. So it might be that integrated conference that perhaps would have been 500 people in Barcelona might now be 3 conferences working side by side, integrated through technology in London, Barcelona and Frankfurt, and with another 200 people dialing in. So that that's the exciting potential future of what needs to be adapted.
And I think it's it's been encouraging to see the amount of innovation, and we use this word pivot a lot, but a lot of organisations in the overall event industry have been finding ways of changing their model and looking at different things and different ways of doing things, which I think is quite encouraging. I know we're running out of time, but very, very keen to hear with on the specifically the Christmas party market, which is a market very close to our hearts. Sam, you did a survey on Christmas as well, so quickly let's have a quick look at that and what the outcome of that was.
Yeah, I'll take 30 seconds just to fill in on to answer the question you asked before. And I think the economic impact is going to be 70 to 80% reduction, a 20 to 30% reduction events 2021 compared to 2019. And I think there are 2 opposing influences. One is that if people are saving money on office space over a period of time, then the need they can afford to spend more money on internal events, and they'll need them more, because if the long term is working from home more, then the need for quarterly gatherings, as and when allowed for staff, will be really important. But obviously then you've got the likelihood of fewer staff in a lot of our client chain, as it were, which might impact on it. And I think also there might be a benefit, rather like with tourism this year, that actually if we're allowed to run events, that actually residential conferences, and we will have more events staying in the UK, obviously less inbound, and that might be a benefit as well. But just quickly, as you suggested, requested on the Christmas party survey slide, let me just get rid of my Q&A slide here. Sorry, just go back to that, my apologies. Oh, finished it. My apologies there. So this was, what is the current status of your 2020 Christmas party plans? So this is, as of the last 2 days, what people's situation was. So we have 16% who have booked, but obviously may review. And that only relates to 20% at the same time when we did a survey last year. So I think really that obviously people who've got events are holding on to them. A small percentage, as you can see at the bottom, have cancelled. An averagely normal percentage are not going to book. And then we've got, you know, over 3/4 of corporate buyers sitting in the waiting room. So I anticipate this to be a later booking season, obviously, and obviously a suppressed booking season. And I think there's one question about what people can do about pricing. I think with Christmas specifically, you know, venues are going to have to be flexible. They're going to have to really encourage people to book off-peak dates, Mondays, Tuesdays, arguably Wednesdays, Saturdays. Saturdays maybe just as a thought, a bit of a thing this year, potentially, because obviously people then don't have to go to work necessarily. But I think they're going to have to be flexible and think about customer retention for the future. It's not all about making money this year. It's about making, you know, retaining clients and giving them satisfactory solutions.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, just in terms of the general need for a social get-together for a team, you know, employee engagement will be more important than ever in many ways this year. And there's, you know, we ran that campaign back 10 years ago, Sam, the Say Thank You at Christmas, which was all about encouraging companies to say thank you to the team. And this year, there'll be a lot to say thank you for the teams who have had to put up and cope with a lot. So I hope that will be something that corporates look at and say, well, it is important to get together at that time of year, and it is important to get the teams, you know, and say thank you to them. So hopefully, in terms of the desire to do a Christmas party, it will still be there. Whether social, I mean, do we feel that social distancing is still going to be a thing by at that time, you know, at the end of the year? I mean, I suppose that's going to be the key thing. If it is, yeah, it's going to be a problem.
If there's not a vaccine, you know, you got Boris Johnson said the other night that this is, you know, this is a long-term battle until we get a vaccine, and if we don't, it's going to carry on. You know, he said that in his speech on Monday night. Yeah. You know, we've got to have a vaccine, otherwise it will just keep on festering and going. Yes, we can drive it down the alley, as they say, and it will die off, but then you could catch it by somebody else coming in from another country, bringing it back into the country again. So, you know, I think we're very clear that yes, you know, we all need testing. We all need to find out whether we've had it, whether we're immune to it. You know, I think I had it at the beginning of March, etc. But yeah, so I don't think we can just think that it's just going to go away.
No, but you know, obviously social distancing is quite a relevant thing in terms of the capability to deliver. And
people are adapting to that quite quickly and being sensible about it. And like you said, it's going to be about self-managing, being sensible. Is you know, the rules that they put in are, of course, the far left or the far right, and then there's that bit of flexibility in between. So, you know, I sneaked off for a cycle ride with my buddy, but we do stay, you know, 10, 12 feet apart.
One sense is starting to prevail.
Yeah, and it's like you're going to go and play golf.
Guys, just tell me, have we any questions?
There are some here if you can't see. Do you want me to do them, Sam? Or
I've been looking, so I'll do a couple. Do you believe large-scale Christmas networking events for 800 people will be able to go ahead this year? Probably not, in my opinion. But again, we'll wait and see. I think, Richard, I'll answer the question because you mentioned it yesterday. Some of Richard's larger clients who regularly do events for over 1,000 people are looking at departmental solutions, which I think is more likely. It just feels more comfortable, appropriate. Intimate's obviously the wrong word, but I think you know what I mean. Quick question, can we see the graphs again? I will be sharing them all on LinkedIn. You don't have to follow me to do so. On a LinkedIn post in the next 8 hours, all the graphs I will share on LinkedIn. Anything else, Richard, you want to pick up on?
No, on the Christmas event and everything else, is, they're also sort of saying we're waiting for companies to come up with new and different ideas that will be taken into account. So I think if you're to come up with the same ideas, which is, okay, there's a marquee in a square and it takes 1,000 people and there's a band and there's this, that and the other, they're looking for something else as well as that potentially. So, again, the virtual Christmas party, I know you hate the idea, but, could we be sending stuff around, or could you having events that are ongoing, or could you have a charity focus? So we're doing something for a good cause that makes us all feel good and positive. Yeah. But it hasn't meant us all coming together, getting slosh, groping each other in the loos, etc., etc.
There's another question or comment on the chat room, which my wife has shown me twice now, which means it must be important, is that about, according to certain perspectives, if you've got a venue that can take 150 people with social distancing, it can only take 27. And this is from one of our viewers. And I think that, again, that is one metric, but obviously it rather depends on the venue and the type of event as to how limited you can make it. But we all know that the conferencing capacity, I probably understated, but the 2 meter distancing probably does reduce your theatre style capacity by more than half, as I've said, because obviously we've got 2 dimensions of distancing to deal with. So apologies for that miscalculation. But it doesn't stop the fact that ultimately, the sooner we can get back to live events, the better. And I think the really important thing to say is that no one's disagreeing with the value of live events. It's just how we access that value safely and over what period of time we manage to deliver that.
And that will take creativity and people thinking things through and working out interesting ways of doing it. And I think that's the challenge for the industry, to come up with ways of trying to make a safe event still happen as an event.
Well, what we need to do is support everyone trying to find a vaccine as much as we can. That is the magic bullet. And until then, as Richard's quite rightly said, we will be compromised. Yeah. As a nation, as individuals, our activities will be compromised. But I do believe that we're judging it from a time after a very long period of lockdown, and we need to see how people psychologically, how industry leaders, the government, and us as individual people in this industry and all the other service and sectors actually return to work. And I think that's another wait and see.
Yeah. Well, and let's just remember, we've all been in this industry for, over 30 years, and we've seen lots of ups and downs. It's a long game. This will be a year or maybe 2 years at most, but eventually things will start to come back and the industry will start to prosper again, because people still will want to do events. And that, as you say, Sam, that is reality. Clients and corporates understand the value. I think that has been proved over the last 10 years in particular. Events are important. They add a huge amount of value to companies. They're commercially vital. And therefore they will start, as soon as they can safely be done, they will start to come back. And eventually once this has moved to the other side, and hopefully we can all look forward to some degree of renaissance. So I think that's probably, we're nearly 50 minutes in.
Mike, can I throw one more thing in there?
Of course.
Because we're talking about digital and the emergence of digital and skills behind it. I highly recommend that, the businesses that are doing that is, again, part of our discussion yesterday, because we're looking at different platforms, and there's a plethora of over 20 different plus digital platforms out there that you can use for conferences and webinars such as this, and total augmented reality things. Big thing that came out of our members yesterday is that everyone's banging on everyone's door. We can do this, we can do that. Guys, you're going to do that. Make sure that you're procurement ready. So when I'm saying that your systems have been tested, that the technology that you're proposing can be used by that organization. So big financial institutions, for example, can't use Zoom. They can go to a meeting on Zoom, but they can't put their meetings on Zoom because Zoom is not seen as a secure enough platform.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And, you know, it's not just ideas, you've got to have a bit more gravitas behind it.
Well, as I was saying earlier, this is a really key thing to make sure the whole thing connects correctly, and as you say, it's compliant with all the regulations. So absolutely vital.
Yeah, and I do think that we have a responsibility as an industry to communicate positively, to think positively. You know, we need to keep that mindset for our own sanity. Mike and I, judging from our grey hair, have been through this on several occasions over, and a lot of the people listening in won't. We have weathered these storms before. This is a unique storm. It's a really hard storm, but the government are doing a lot to support us. We should, I think, thank and respect them for that. But I'm very hopeful and expectant that the industry will begin to reawaken, you know, in the next 4 to 6 weeks. I think it'll take that amount of time to get confidence back. And as citizens of the United Kingdom, we have a responsibility to ensure that we keep that R rate down whilst we're doing it. And I would urge people to continue to obey the guidelines, because if you don't, then that puts us all at further economic as well as personal risk.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you to Sam and Richard, and thank you to everybody for listening. If you found it valuable, then please make a donation to the show's charity, NSPCC, who, like many other great causes, are in need of your help more than ever now. There's a Just Giving link will follow later.
And if I could do a quick...
Yeah, sorry, Richard.
So I was going to do a quick plug for Event Marketing Association. EMA is a not-for-profit organisation. I know you've got lots of corporates on here. If you're not already a member, sign up, it's free. And we hold regular webinars at the moment, 2 or 3 times a week on different topics, and collaborate.
Yeah, for sure. And very, very good
Thank you.
association that is too. And we have got a few more great live sessions coming up today, including one at 3 o'clock, just to mention that, the 2020's Best London Venue Christmas Party Themes. So that's Story Events and Venue Search London will be sharing their picks on the best themes available in London for your 2020 Christmas party, bearing in mind all the things that we've been talking about. So please register online if you'd like to join any of those. But there we are, nearly an hour. But thank you very much indeed to everybody for joining us. Thank you particularly to Sam and Richard. And good luck and farewell to all of you.